Hi Krishna everyone, this is the acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today I'm taking another Q&A. We're doing a lot of Q&A videos this summer, mostly because I'm redesigning a lot of my course curriculum right now, and so am slowing down a little bit in my ability to make a lot of new content for the Bhakti channel. So it's been really nice to field questions from people because I just have to sit down and maybe make a few notes and respond. But for those of you who have been waiting, I know there's been a little bit of a wait for my Sri Ishupanishad series to keep going forward. We'll be resuming with that shortly. But in the meantime, here's a great question from one of you, and I hope that you enjoy my response. Hi Achyuta, I have a bhakti question. I am trying to wrap my head around why souls would want to experience the pain of being separated from God. You say that it's a choice, but why doesn't it feel that way? Why isn't it enough for a soul to turn to God and say, okay, I want to come back. Can we turn the lights on? I've heard that it takes many lifetimes once you've turned towards God to not come back to this realm. Why is it such a process? I'm loving all the bhakti content. It feels like a natural progression from your talks on astrology. Thank you. Well, I hope that you continue to enjoy this series, and hopefully, I have a comprehensible answer, because it's really good questions, and I myself sometimes have these questions. I think they come up over and over again on the path. And if you're asking such a question, as my guru would say, it means that you're already on the path of surrendering. And it's really important to because such questions are a sign of one who's basically engaged with God consciousness already. You're already thinking about God. You're wondering. You're sincere, and you're knocking. And when you knock, the door will be opened, as Jesus said. So I think that's a really good sign, first of all. And I try to remember that when I have my own doubts, that it's not against the rules to have doubts. Doubt is a sign of the heart's sincerity. So and God sees that. God sees the sincerity in the doubt more than the doubt itself. It's not illegal to have a doubt. God understands completely why we have doubts. So that's how my guru has helped me understand my own anyway. So I'm trying to wrap my head around why souls would want to experience the pain of being separated from God. Well, all different kinds of scriptures in the Eastern traditions, whether it's Buddhism or Bhakti Yoga, are pretty much unanimous on this question, which is that we got here somehow or other. Somehow or other, we're in a realm where we're having an experience of being quite independent and quite separate, when that's not actually the case. So why did we come? There's lots of answers that I've heard people give. God provides a realm like this because having the temporary experience of being separate from God, only to remember that we aren't and can't really be separate from God, is quite a revelation, quite a beautiful experience from the standpoint of eternity. Although when we're here in the sometimes limited trappings of time and space and bodies and all sorts of dramas and pain, we can lose sight of that, and it can feel a lot more painful and bewildering. And if you think about it, when you wake up in the morning, you wake up instantly, and you think, well, how long was I asleep? What did I dream? Where did I go? Where was I that whole time? In a similar manner, when we start coming to Krishna consciousness, when we start awakening the spirit soul, the awakening process is pretty instantaneous from the standpoint of eternity, right? It's like it doesn't really matter how long we've been sleeping, or why we were asleep, or what happened exactly. We're just awake now. So similarly, again, in spiritual life too, this realm is a kind of place where we fall asleep somehow. And as we are awakening within this realm and saying, why am I here? Who am I? What's real? That's a sign of the dreamer waking up. And then the waking up happens pretty instantly. So we really have to trust that process is quicker than we think it is, and that the understanding of who we are and what's real comes pretty quickly, And in some ways, it may not even matter too much where we were or why we were asleep. Seeing what's real is the reward. And sometimes we think, well, unless I understand why I was asleep, I can't understand what being awake means. But you don't figure out, uh, when you wake up, you wake up. And it's not that you woke up because somehow you figured out um, you know, it's because you figured out like why exactly you went to sleep, that because you figured out why you went to sleep, that now you have all the answers you need, and that's what wakes you up. No, you just wake up. Your body just wakes you up. So there's a way in which I'm trying to say is that we don't even necessarily need to understand exactly why we're here. You wake up, you just sort of, it's just happening. And but there's definitely this connection at the same time to being intentional and asking, why am I here? How did I get here? That starts to show the dreamer, the sleeper, becoming more lucid and waking up. So but anyway, it's also possible that, again, from the standpoint of eternity, that it's what an experience. It's like a drop in the bucket. You come here, you explore this realm of feeling like you're an independent little god that's in charge of your own reality, and you're totally independent. And um and of course, that souls are attracted to that. Souls are attracted to that, it's said in various traditions, because they're envious of God, or they want to see what it's like to be God. So they go into a realm where they can feel like they're God, they're independent creators. um, but what we find out is that, um, you know separate, apart from our role in the body of God, in the service of God, in the union with God, it's very painful. And so once we start to ask, who am I? What's my actual constitutional position in reality? Who am I? And am I really alone? Am I really apart from everything else? We start to realize that we aren't. And again, then we come to see that we're waking up. So, and at which point it almost matters more that we've never been alone, that we've always been a part of this thing called God, than this being, than it is to, than it is to really hash out how and why and things like that. Like in Buddhism, it's often said, like, if you're shot in the leg with an arrow, it's more important to take care of the wound immediately than to figure out, you know, where the arrow came from, who invented arrows, like that. So that's another way of looking at it. And it is a choice. It is a choice that we've made to come here, though. That part is very clear in all the scriptures, that we chose to come here to this world where we have this experience. Why doesn't it feel like it's a choice? Um, well, I think that it does. The more that we choose to love and serve and surrender our lives to God, the more that we're able to see all the choices that we make all the time to do otherwise, and how inclined we are to identify with the illusion of being separate from God, of being apart from God. For example, think of how easy it is to, once I get done making this video, just go do a bunch of stuff that is really probably mostly self-serving and not in remembrance of God, or not trying to, you know what I mean? And it could be very mundane. It's like, oh, well, I just want to eat something. I'm feeling hungry. I'm feeling like I want something to satisfy my hunger, or whatever. Most of the ways in which we forget God are very basic and mundane, moment to moment, but if you notice how difficult it is to think about God and be devoted to God in everyday life, it's when you notice how difficult it is to make that choice and to stay in remembrance, the basic realization that I'm a part of God, that I'm one of God's servants, that I'm a part of the body of God, so forth. Um, it's very hard to stay in that remembrance. Why? If we ask why, we can see that quite clearly it's hard to stay in it, because we keep making the choice with our free will over and over again to do something else, to do something that is in the name of or interest of our sense of separateness or apartness or total independence. And it's not that we aren't independent beings, but it's that we find the true meaning of our freedom and independence in serving and being a part of God. So, like, my freedom, my independence, it turns out to be pretty painful and meaningless unless I'm using my free will to say, hey, how can I serve? How can I be a part of your infinite loving flow of mercy, love, beauty, kindness? How can I be a part of that? How can I choose to be a part of that? Every single minute, in every thought, in every action, in every word. What a really hard thing to choose. Why? Because if I look in my heart, I realize I'm deeply conditioned to want to do things that are only about me, that are only about myself. So it's a choice to choose to remember God, to serve God, to love God, to be in alignment with those universal currents. It's a practice and it's a choice. And the evidence that we have that it is such a choice is that it's a choice that if we make, we see the fruits and results of because we feel better. We feel more in touch with who we really are. And we know that it's a choice because we also can see that we don't choose it all the time. We choose something else and we can compare the results. So, yeah. Um, why isn't it enough for a soul to turn toward God and say, okay, I want to come back. Can we turn the lights on? Because we're not children. We are, in a sense, we're a beloved, innocent children of God. But, you know, um, if my daughter is like, if I'm a parent, and my daughter is misbehaving and she says, okay, okay, and I'm like, you don't get a cookie, because you're misbehaving. And my child's like, okay, 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 I'll be good. Probably why is she saying that? Because she wants a cookie. You know what I mean? Well, similarly, like God doesn't want to just sit in some parental role where God is like, you know, okay, you have to experience some degree of suffering, um, and then we're like, well, I don't want to suffer. I don't want to suffer. Okay, let's just end it. And God's like, okay, good. Now I'll give you a cookie. Do you see what I mean? God's not. God doesn't want to relate to us as someone who's only there to give us some kind of reward. God wants us to be a part of God, a loving like. So what does that take? What is it like? It takes more than just not wanting pain. It takes more than just not wanting suffering or to be free from things that we don't like. It takes more than just not wanting to suffer, not wanting to be alone, or it takes the choice and the action and the devotion to be all that we can be. In other words, we have to work out our own salvation with faith in choices and actions over time, and we have to keep doing it. And then mercy comes to help us. Grace comes to help us. It's not like we're trying to scale a mountain, but we have to make the choice to say, I'm going to love God. I want to be a part of this infinite majesty and serving its way in creation. And when we do that and we put our heart into it over and over again, and we don't give up, we just keep going. We fall back down, but we get back up and keep going like that. Then mercy descends and helps us along. And mercy is always descending, helping us along. Um, so for me to be able to speak any modicum of truth in this video is because of grace, not because of like something that I did, right? So, but at the same time, it's like, it's just like, well, just like if you think about a parent with a child and you want the child to actually inhabit virtues and be virtuous, not just do the right thing to get the cookie. You have to give them some rewards to encourage them, but you also have to keep bringing them along in a way that where the child is really cultivating their own goodness, their own virtues, their own using their free will to become that version of themselves. So God won't allow us to have some kind of um, it's cheapening of salvation. It's something that like God's like infinitely tolerant, and there's an infinite amount of time because we're all eternal beings. So it's not enough for a soul to turn to God and say, okay, I want to come back. Can we turn the lights on? When the soul is only, you know, asking that question from the standpoint of just wanting the rough stuff to be over, just wanting to get the cookie. But once we do, you said, I've heard that it takes many lifetimes. Well, it's not as my guru would say, it's not a stereotyped thing. Every soul's return to God is infinitely personal. Some people it happens very quickly. Other people, it takes a different amount of time, and the time it takes, quick or slow, is not about the merit of the soul or the, you know, brilliance of the soul. It's very personal. You know what I mean? So um, the way in which each of us evolve is from the standpoint of bhakti about the personal relationship that's being forged in the heart with God. And so that's not something that can be like, you can't expedite that. You wouldn't want to. It's sort of like saying if you're making love with someone and you're going towards the world's greatest climax. I don't mean to cheapen it with such a metaphor, but it's that's something I think a lot of people can understand. You don't the time it takes to get there and the journey along the way are just perfect. You know what I mean? So um, I think that, you know, the intimacy that we're forging with God, who in the highest depiction in bhakti is a lover, not in the sense of, you know, getting off in some cheap way, but like a really like a beautiful, the most beautiful personal lover that each of us have. Um, that the journey to reaching that intimacy is not just about saying, look, I don't want to suffer anymore, because the pain of separation that we each feel individually is also such an intimate part of the journey to consummating this love of God. So anyway, hopefully this all makes sense and falls into place somehow. Um, um, the other thing is that when you say that you've heard that it takes many lifetimes once you've turned toward God to not come back to this realm, why is it such a process? Um, we also have to think about it from the standpoint of eternity again. So when you're waking up in the morning, you know, it takes maybe a couple minutes to get the grog out and to be like, oh, okay, well, those few minutes could be 1,000 lifetimes. So the attitude of the devotee is I could take 1,000 or 10,000, just as long as I don't, as I, as long as I can keep chanting about you, thinking about you, and knowing that I'm coming along on my path, I'm fine. I don't. So there's a story where these two devotees are like sitting there, these two yogis or whatever, and you know, one of them, Krishna comes to and says, "Okay, I'm gonna, good news, you know, you're gonna get to see me again in a million lifetimes. You're gonna come back to me." And you know, the one's been sitting there practicing forever, you know, whatever, in real austere yogic postures and stuff. And he's like, "Oh my God, you know, a million lifetimes, I got to keep working at this." And the other one who's sitting there just, you know, reveling in chanting the names of God and just emotionally feeling full in their heart with love of God is like dancing. They're like, "I get to see you. That's like, I'm going to get to see you." And that matters more than in how long. So similarly, you know, we want to become the real deal. That's why I use that cookie analogy. We want to become the real highest self that we are. And so God is infinitely patient and infinitely personal with each of us and how that process unfolds, because there's time to do so and there's time to be so. Um, and we should, I think, we should dare to think that that's exciting rather than discouraging. Not that I'm there, but yeah. So anyway, uh, okay. So I kind of wandered around in this one, but I hope that I was able to answer the question. If anything was unclear, feel free to email me, info@nightlightastrology.com. Thank you everyone for listening, and I hope you're having a really nice week. Hare Krishna.